Welcome back to the future of. This is the space for those curious about the future. I am Andrea Ferrante and I tell you about technologies, strokes of genius and discontinuities that could become big and shape the way we will live tomorrow. In this episode, in addition to 3 news from the future that tell us about intriguing scenarios, I have dedicated ample space to reading a story entitled An Express of the Future which, if you have the patience to listen to the end, will leave you speechless. 1. Quantum network. Researchers at the University of Delft realized the first protocol to network 3 quantum computers. I explain why it is a real technological breakthrough, and where it can lead us. 2. Whose sun is it? That is, the story of an ambitious £18 billion project to create and transport solar energy thousands of miles away. With no small number of technical, financial, and geopolitical impacts. 3. A staff of 1,000 robots. The grocery chain Kroger in the USA opens a first-order preparation center, where 1,000 robots work, that thanks to a special architecture and artificial intelligence do everything by themselves. 4. Verne's Hyperloop. A wonderful story from the past that describes in full a technology that we still dream of today. Are you ready? Then hold on tight, buckle up, ready to go.
Silence, please.
Quantum network. I used the word network, not computing. I have already talked about quantum computers in the future of, but I have never talked about possible networks of quantum computers. If a single machine can already do, and will do even more in the future amazing things, think what could do an entire network of machines working together. And it's obviously not science fiction. Physicists at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands have successfully connected 3 quantum devices, and published their findings Thursday in the prestigious journal Science. 2 quantum computers had previously been networked together, but through a physical connection. Clearly, if to make a network, we wanted to physically and directly connect all existing quantum computers together, the scalability of the structure would be really arduous and expensive. Being able to pass quantum information through intermediate nodes, analogous to the routers of the classical Internet, is essential to create a scalable quantum network. To do that you needed a protocol, and that's what the researchers at Delft University achieved. Why was this difficult? While today's Internet distributes information in bits, which can be represented by a 0 or a 1, a future quantum Internet will make use of quantum bits that can be 0 and 1 at the same time. A decidedly more complex scenario. Transferring this type of information and verifying that it was passed correctly in 2 places not directly connected to each other had never been tried. Quantum computing allows and promises processing at more than 100 million times the speed of a classical computer. Simply put, a quantum computer can process every possible answer to a problem simultaneously. Imagine the processing power of multiple quantum devices, or nodes, connected through a quantum internet. Experts, or perhaps we should still call them dreamers, predict that a global network of quantum computers could theoretically provide answers to some of our most challenging questions, such as solving climate change, curing disease, or solving world hunger. But, let's not get too hung up on theory. The most immediate benefit is security. When done right, a secure communications protocol gives the advantage of not having to trust and rely on any intermediary, hardware vendors, software vendors, network operator, or the government. And if you're a bit mischievous, you can also see that those with such computing power and secure protocols are not only able to protect their own information, but can also decrypt that of others. Surely it would be a short-term advantage, because then also the others would be equipped with the same technology, but in the field of espionage anyway, first come first served. The quantum internet is still a distant goal, but this 3-nodes network brings us significantly closer to the goal. The next steps of the Delft team are already planned. First, Increase the number of nodes and test new dedicated hardware and software. Second, bring the technology outside the walls of the university labs in 2022, using the city's telecommunications fiber. And lest we forget, 2022 is practically tomorrow.
Whose sun is it? The question posed in this way is even banal. Everyone's. What about when the sun's rays touch the ground? Here it is a little less trivial. It's whose rays get them. The British company Lynx is planning to build a 10.5 gigawatts mixed solar and wind plant in Morocco and sell the energy generated by the huge plant in the UK. This should be made possible by a 3,800 kilometers high-voltage DC transmission line, which would be connected to locations in Wales and Devon. Essentially a very long undersea cable, or rather 4 interconnected cables to be precise, that would carry power from Morocco to England. Morocco is obviously in a strategic position, given that it would obviously be more expensive and complex to build plants in African countries further inland and far from the coast. And since it is a coastal country, access to the sea is immediate. Overall, Lynx plans to invest around £18 billion in the project. When fully completed, it will provide 26 terawatt-hours of stable, flexible energy to the UK each year. In practice, it would go on to generate 7.5% of the country's electricity demand and contribute significantly to national decarbonization goals. How does the selling price of such energy compare to other alternatives? Lynx is planning to transmit power in the UK at a price of around £0.048 per kilowatt-hour, which would be slightly more than the approximately £0.040 per kilowatt-hour of current offshore wind tenders, but much less than the £0.0925 per kilowatt-hour of the controversial Hinkley Point nuclear power plant currently under construction, while delivering essentially the same performance. But there are also a few technical and financial issues. The financial ones refer to the fact that such a price is possible thanks to special purchase contracts based on downward auctions, which only exist because the government subsidizes technologies that are not yet considered mature. And when solar is considered mature, what will happen? The project would not stand without the subsidies, the company itself states. The second problem concerns the fact that the cables will not be able to pass only in international waters. The authorization of Spain, Portugal and France will be needed, as the infrastructure will pass close to their coasts. And with England out of the European Union, what might have seemed easy before is not necessarily so. The third issue concerns the cables themselves. The company is currently in negotiations with 3 major European cable manufacturers to build the transmission lines, and the biggest constraint to the project's development could be a bottleneck in cable supply, as the offshore wind industry has a strong need for these components. And production capacity is obviously not infinite. The last issue concerns leaks. Cable losses along the entire transmission line are estimated at 10 to 12%, but these are justified, at least in light of existing technologies. In short, the project is really important and complex. Even if all in all it only puts together pieces of existing technologies, the financial and geopolitical implications are not trivial. Today the world already transports along oil and gas pipelines, resources created in one place, but needed in another. With the difference that generally individual states own the facilities created on their soil, here a British company would go to a third country to install an infrastructure that it wants to use only itself. We could be content to say that if you pay you can get what you want, but what emerges once again is the total lack of a collective strategy. If the British have now chosen to go it alone, Europe on the contrary, at latitudes not unlike those of Morocco, has territories in Spain, Greece and southern Italy. The solar energy of these countries could feed the entire continent. Why don't we start talking about it?
A staff of 1,000 robots. Last week we talked about the very topic of robot taxation. And here we are just a few days later, talking about the opening of Kroger's largest fully automated order preparation warehouse in the U.S. Kroger has more than 2,700 stores in 35 U.S. states, and its annual sales total more than $120 billion, numbers that make it the largest traditional grocery chain in the U.S. and one of the largest global players. Before the pandemic, Kroger was falling behind its competitors, some of whom already had robust online shopping programs in place before COVID struck. Kroger now looks to make up for lost time and market share by building huge automated warehouses where robots prepare grocery orders received online from customers. Construction on the first of these warehouses has been completed. A nearly 35,000 square foot sorting center opened this week in Cincinnati and will soon be followed by one outside Orlando. Investments of about $50 million each. Here's how they work. About 28,000 different items are stacked in layers of crates 3 stories high. Robots move along a grid called the hive atop these stacks of crates. Each robot has an empty space at its center and an arm that can reach down to grab individual items or entire crates, using a suction mechanism to pick up items. The robots can prepare an order of 50 items in less than 5 minutes with 99% accuracy. Each robot is capable of running up to 14 kilometers in an hour, practically a marathon in less than half a day. We can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that they are much faster than a human. Algorithms determine where items are placed in the grid, with the most commonly ordered items at the top and rarely purchased items at the bottom. Other algorithms help with packing, making sure fragile items go on top and bags are weighed evenly. And voila! The orders are ready. Watching them all move together, these robots that look like washing machines make quite an impression. While there's no need for them to have humanoid shapes or appearances, the technological dance they perform while doing their thing is quite eerie. If only because there's virtually no living soul, human I mean, and the only noises you hear are mechanical in nature. Also, at the Ohio facility, there's a fleet of 400 temperature-controlled delivery trucks that can hold 20 orders each. Okay, the men will be in charge of driving the trucks. At least for now. In addition, the facility will employ another 400 people in customer service, engineering, operations, inventory management, and quality. In short, a few hundred jobs created, but surely with a staff of 1,000 robots. If they had used people for the same production capacity, we'd be talking thousands. Has Kroger made a worthwhile investment? Will it pay for itself? And if so, in how long? We can say that in the very short term the choice is doubtful. A certain amount of people will still prefer the pleasure of shopping for food in the store, among colors, flavors, scents, and perhaps even memories of times past. But we are an endangered species, at least for obvious reasons. Second, in the short term is expected a decline in food purchases in chains. The reopening of restaurants will lead people to eat out, at least for a while, to re-experience life outdoors and on the road. The sooner COVID is defeated or at least contained, the sooner this will happen. A Credit Suisse analyst predicted that it will take Kroger about 8 years to return on its investment. In the meantime, you don't even need to wait 8 years, the future is already here.
I'm going to tell you a story. Or rather, read it. Because I didn't write it, I only translated it. Listen to it all the way through, I won't tell you anything. The surprises come at the end. Take care, cried my conductor, there's a step. Safely descending the step thus indicated to me, I entered a vast room, illuminated by blinding electric reflectors, the sound of our feet alone breaking the solitude and silence of the place. Where was I? What had I come there to do? Who was my mysterious guide? Questions unanswered. A long walk in the night, iron doors opened and reclosed with a clang, stairs descending, it seemed to me, deep into the earth. That is all I could remember. I had, however, no time for thinking. No doubt you are asking yourself who I am, said my guide, Colonel Pierce, at your service. Where are you? In America, at Boston in a station. A station? Yes, the starting point of the Boston to Liverpool Pneumatic Tubes Company. And, with an explanatory gesture, the colonel pointed out to me two long iron cylinders, about 1.5 meters in diameter, lying upon the ground a few paces off. I looked at these two cylinders, ending on the right in a mass of masonry, and closed on the left with heavy metallic caps, from which a cluster of tubes were carried up to the roof, and suddenly I comprehended the purpose of all this. Had I not, a short time before, read, in an American newspaper, an article describing this extraordinary project for linking Europe with the New World by means of two gigantic submarines tubes? An inventor had claimed to have accomplished the task, and that inventor, Colonel Pierce, I had before me. In thought I realized the newspaper article. Complacently the journalist entered into the details of the enterprise. He stated that more than 3,000 miles of iron tubes, weighing over 13 million tons, were required, with the number of ships necessary, for the transport of this material. 200 ships of 2,000 tons, each making 33 voyages. He described this armada of science bearing the steel to two special vessels, on board of which the ends of the tubes were joined to each other, and encased in a triple netting of iron, the whole covered with a resinous preparation to preserve it from the action of the seawater. Coming at once to the question of working, he filled the tubes transformed into a sort of pea shooter of interminable length with a series of carriages, to be carried with their travelers by powerful currents of air, in the same way that dispatches are conveyed pneumatically round Paris. A parallel with the railways closed the article, and the author enumerated with enthusiasm the advantages of the new and audacious system. According to him, there would be, in passing through these tubes, a suppression of all nervous trepidation, thanks to the interior surface being of finely polished steel, equality of temperature secured by means of currents of air, by which the heat could be modified according to the seasons, incredibly low fares, owing to the cheapness of construction and working expenses, forgetting, or waving aside, all considerations of the question of gravitation and of wear and tear. All that now came back to my mind. So then, this utopia had become a reality, and these two cylinders of iron at my feet passed thence under the Atlantic, and reached to the coast of England. In spite of the evidence, I could not bring myself to believe in the thing having been done. That the tubes had been laid I could not doubt, but that men could travel by this route never. Was it not impossible even to obtain a current of air of that length? I expressed that opinion aloud. Quite easy, on the contrary, protested Colonel Pierce. To obtain it, all that is required is a great number of steam fans similar to those used in blast furnaces. The air is driven by them with a force which is practically unlimited, propelling it at the speed of 1,800 kilometers an hour, almost that of a cannonball, so that our carriages with their travelers, in the space of 2 hours and 40 minutes, accomplish the journey between Boston and Liverpool. 1,800 kilometers an hour! I exclaimed. Not one less. And what extraordinary consequences arise from such a rate of speed? The time at Liverpool being 4 hours and 40 minutes in advance of ours, a traveler starting from Boston at 9 o'clock in the morning, arrives in England at 3:53 in the afternoon. Isn't that a journey quickly made? In another sense, on the contrary, our trains, in this latitude, gain over the sun more than 900 kilometers an hour, beating that planet hand over hand. Quitting Liverpool at noon, for example, the traveler will reach the station where we now are at 34 minutes past 9 in the morning, that is to say, earlier than he started. I don't think one can travel quicker than that. I did not know what to think. Was I talking with a madman, or must I credit these fabulous theories, in spite of the objections which rose in my mind? Very well, so be it. I said. I will admit that travelers may take this mad-brained route, and that you can obtain this incredible speed. But, when you have got this speed, how do you check it? When you come to a stop, everything must be shattered to pieces. Not at all, replied the colonel, shrugging his shoulders. Between our tubes, one for the out, the other for the home journey, consequently worked by currents going in opposite directions, a communication exists at every joint. When a train is approaching, an electric spark advertises us of the fact. Left to itself, the train would continue its course by reason of the speed it had acquired, but simply by the turning of a handle, we are able to let in the opposing current of compressed air from the parallel tube, and, little by little, reduce to nothing the final shock or stopping. But what is the use of all these explanations? Would not a trial be 100 times better? And, without waiting for an answer to his questions, the colonel pulled sharply a bright brass knob projecting from the side of one of the tubes. A panel slid smoothly in its grooves, and in the opening left by its removal I perceived a row of seats, on each of which two persons might sit comfortably side by side. "The carriage," exclaimed the colonel. "Come in." I followed him without offering any objection, and the panel immediately slid back into its place. By the light of an electric lamp in the roof I carefully examined the carriage I was in. Nothing could be more simple: a long cylinder, comfortably upholstered, along which some 50 armchairs, in pairs, were ranged in 25 parallel ranks. At either end a valve regulated the atmospheric pressure, that at the farther end allowing breathable air to enter the carriage, that in front allowing for the discharge of any excess beyond a normal pressure. After spending a few moments on this examination, I became impatient. "Well," I said, "are we not going to start?" "Going to start?" cried the colonel. "We have started." Started like that without the least jerk, was it possible? I listened attentively, trying to detect a sound of some kind that might have guided me. If we had really started, if the colonel had not deceived me in talking of a speed of 1800 kilometers an hour, we must already be far from any land, under the sea. Above our heads the huge, foam-crested waves, even at that moment, perhaps taking it for a monstrous sea serpent of an unknown kind, whales were battering with their powerful tails our long, iron prison. But I heard nothing but a dull rumble, produced, no doubt, by the passage of our carriage, and, plunged in boundless astonishment, unable to believe in the reality of all that had happened to me, I sat silently, allowing the time to pass. At the end of about an hour, a sense of freshness upon my forehead suddenly aroused me from the torpor into which I had sunk by degrees. I raised my hand to my brow. It was moist. Moist. Why was that? Had the tube burst under pressure of the waters, a pressure which could not but be formidable, since it increases at the rate of an atmosphere every 10 meters of depth? Had the ocean broken in upon us? Fear seized upon me. Terrified, I tried to call out Anne, and I found myself in my garden, generously sprinkled by a driving rain, the big drops of which had awakened me. I had simply fallen asleep while reading the article devoted by an American journalist to the fantastic projects of Colonel Pierce, who also, I much fear, has only dreamed. Michael Verne, Son of Jules, 1888.
Thank you for listening to The Future of, Really. You could have listened to the radio, you could have spun a vinyl, you could have put on a cassette, you could have used a stereo 8 to know what it was, but instead you preferred The Future of. That's what I thank you for, and you still have hundreds of episodes left to discover. Sentence of the week. You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking back. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow come together in your future. You have to have faith in something, your instincts, fate, life, karma, whatever. That approach has never failed me, and has made all the difference in my life. Steve Jobs.